Welcome back to the Witch Church podcast. It's Mal, and I'm so excited to be here with astrologer and couples therapist Janay Anthony. And Janay and I got connected kind of through the Association for Young Astrologers, or AYA, and Janay is the president of AYA. So I'm super excited to have her help me out with the Big Three podcasts for May 2025. If you're a new listener, the Big Three is when myself and a guest come on and talk about the top three transits of the month ahead, plus the lunations. We might sneak a few in, just a few small ones in, but it's mostly the main big three transits. And we're giving you a super cool month ahead forecast from our point of view. So, welcome to Witch Church, Janay. I'm excited to have you and to talk about the month ahead.
Yeah, hi Mel. I'm so appreciative for you inviting me to be on your podcast, and also hello to the listeners.
Yes, I know. I told my Witch Church crew on Sunday that I had a super cool guest. So I'm excited that you're here. And Janay, can you tell us your big three? And I also, my burning question too is, what came first for you? Was it astrology, or was it your interest in becoming a therapist, or was it both? I want to know how that kind of threaded into your journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a Taurus sun, a Gemini moon, and a Leo rising. So I feel super special getting to talk about the May transits because so much of it maps onto my natal chart. And as a Leo rising, I love seeing myself in everything. So excited to get to that piece. But yeah, a little bit about my own journey with astrology. I would say I have always kind of been interested in helping other people, and the way that played out has looked different over time. For a large part of my teens, that was just like being on internet forums and thinking I knew enough to give other people advice. But yeah, with astrology specifically, I would say I came to it in a very, I guess, like, strange way. So, again, the internet is involved, but there was one time I was around 12 or 13, and I set up just this like impromptu lemonade stand in front of my house. And I was just like selling lemonade, and then these boys from up the street came over to me with a half-eaten pizza, and they were like, we can trade you this pizza for all of your lemonade. And I was like, no, thank you. Like, please go away. Please leave me alone. Um, but then that evening, I was reading my horoscope on Yahoo's homepage, and it said for Taurus, it was like, be wary of like bad business deals or something. And I was like, in my 12-year-old brain, I was like, that pizza, that half-eaten pizza, was that bad business deal, and astrology is real now. So ever since then, well, after that point, I did get into the habit of like reading daily horoscopes, but then at some point I found my birth chart, and then my world just exploded, and I've been pretty deep in studying astrology ever since.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Also, that's something we have in common, that astrology came to us around like 12-ish. And I later learned that's the first Jupiter return.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, did it feel like your sort of younger astrological studies led you to being interested in psychology and becoming a therapist?
Yeah, not at all. I would say those are very disjointed, actually. Because when I did start learning astrology, like Jungian astrology or psychological astrology, like really never resonated with me. So I am more of a traditional astrologer. Um, but at the same time, I've always had like a burning passion for human sexuality. like with my Gemini moon, I cycle through different phases, different topics all the time. Um, but human sexuality is one that I've always been interested in. So I'm like, how can I like take this unwavering interest, which is a rare occurrence for me, and like somehow fit it into my job? And then around the time I was listening to like a lot of like sex advice and relationship advice type of podcasts, and then I realized like, oh, this is something people do for a living. Like I could do this. And so my interest in becoming a therapist really has been led through like wanting to be a sex therapist specifically, because I feel like there are um, so many conversations that people don't have about sex, and I want to help facilitate and create spaces where people feel comfortable exploring their sexuality and talking about sex.
Wow, that's amazing. Now I want to know what your Venus sign is too.
hmm Venus and Aries.
Oh, okay. So you're going to have your Venus return coming up soon.
Yeah.
I also, while you were talking, I was like, this sounds very Venus and Aries. You know, that
For
the
sure.
like just the interest in how relationships and sexuality and gender intersect and how it can get complicated and how maybe we view something like that as a taboo subject, whereas Venus and Aries is like nothing is taboo, like I want to talk about it all.
You're right. Yeah, and then also like bringing in like a dignity perspective on it. Like Venus and Aries itself is taboo. It's like the
Yes.
dignity that people don't want to have. So it's like I am taboo. I'm just gonna keep doing me and like help other people become comfortable in the process, because I do notice that a lot of the clients I work with are who I would call like erotically marginalized folks. So queer folks, polyamorous folks, people of color who so often are not represented in um just like the whole of their humanness is not always represented in conversations about sex, and like displays of sex across popular media as well. And so I really do like want to center those who usually don't get that attention. And I feel like that perfectly maps on to my Venus and Aries, where I'm like, you know what? No one else is going to celebrate us, but we're going to celebrate ourselves. So let's come over and like have a sexy party.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That is such a good take on Venus and Aries. And I have one more burning question of my own when it comes to you as a sex and couples therapist. Do your clients know that you're an astrologer and do they ask you to look at their charts, or is that something that you keep separate?
Yeah, so for a long time I did keep them separate because I was like, well, if I want to be taken seriously as a therapist, should I really incorporate astrology into that? But that Venus and Aries is actually ruling my MC, so I was very quickly like, yeah, I don't care. I want to do it all. So, yeah, there are some clients who I do incorporate astrology with, both with my individuals and also with couples I work with. We look at both their charts individually and then also synastry and like how that maps on to like the different relational patterns. And it's really interesting to do that with couples, because most of my astrological work has just been with individuals, like talking to or like talking one-on-one to folks about their natal charts. And so being able to actually, as a couples therapist, have insight into people's relationships and also look at the synastry and like be able to see different patterns and like how this square here is like indicative of this argument they like constantly have and like having that extra layer of insight into like the astrology and how it's manifesting in real time in a relationship um it's really cool, because typically folks are only looking at their own synastry chart, like myself included. I look at my own synastry with other people, and that kind of lacks that external perspective that I get to experience when using astrology with my therapy clients.
How cool. Yeah, it's so cool to observe. how synastry can come to life, and even like some like mumbo jumbo synastry stuff about like, oh, a square is bad, or like that kind of opposition, it's never going to work out, and you see it as a therapist and you're like, well, maybe that's a challenge, but it doesn't mean these two people can't work through things. And perhaps that very thing is why their souls came together to be in partnership, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, squares are sexy, oppositions are sexy. Like there is no appeal if there isn't any tension. And like this is kind of going into other areas here, but there is so much literature written on how to maintain like an erotic connection with your partner, there needs to be some sort of like curiosity, some kind of draw. And when things are just like very easy and very safe, some of that erotic appeal can go away. So, especially in long-term relationships, it is this balance between like safety and comfort and mystery and excitement and like helping folks get that or like explore those concepts in general, and then also being able to use that as an entry point into the astrology and recognizing different options for these more tense aspects, I think is like it's really rewarding and fulfilling to do that work.
I love, yes. I think that's like the perfect segue into our first transit. And for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull it up. Actually, Janae and I decided to already break the rules because we're already talking about Venus and Aries. But Venus technically will sneak into Aries the last day of April. But by May 1st, Venus is at 0 degrees Aries, approaching a conjunction with Neptune. And then by the next day, May 2nd, Mars in Leo clears their shadow period. Their very long, grueling shadow period. I never thought this day would come. So we'll focus on those first 2 days of May, incorporating both Venus in Aries and Mars in Leo. I find it super interesting. We're already kind of talking about Venus in Aries and a sort of maybe unconventional way of relating to each other. Um, I want to know a little bit more, maybe from the Hellenistic standpoint. Venus maybe doesn't love to be in Aries or is feeling a little bit uncomfortable in Aries. It doesn't mean Venus in Aries is inherently bad, but perhaps it's a bit of an uncomfortable energy for Venus. I want to know more about that from the Hellenistic viewpoint, Janae, if you feel called to tell us.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll break it down because what comes to mind for me is like, what is the function of Venus? My understanding, how I like to interpret Venus, Venus is about connecting and like bringing things together. Um, with relationships, that would be bringing people together. And Aries is like a very individualistic sign. So that's why Venus is so uncomfortable in Aries, is because its nature to connect is challenged by Aries's like drive to like trailblaze, be its own thing, not really be overly concerned with like how others are coming into that picture. And so I think with Venus going into Aries, I would expect to notice a lot more people like wanting to focus on themselves and like celebrating themselves and like feeling themselves, working on that relationship with self, because that is also a relationship people have. Um, and at the same time, with Neptune being right there, Neptune being so loud and really diffusing boundaries that people have, I could imagine this could create some tension between like that desire to um like have solo time, be alone, work on yourself, and connect with others. And I feel like that kind of speaks to the broader like Venus retrograde story we've had, moving from Aries back to Pisces and now back to Aries, and that Neptune is also like bringing in some of that Piscean watery energy too. So it's kind of like, even though Venus is direct now, it's still a continuation of that Aries, Pisces, Venus moving back and forth story.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. This Venus ingress back into Aries, it's already happened and it's incorporated into Venus's whole retrograde cycle we had earlier this year. And as you were talking about just the basics of Venus being in detriment in Aries, I was thinking about how in my own personal life, I've had like so many conflicts this year, particularly. I don't know why. It's got to be the mix of both Venus and Mars having those retrograde periods, and now they're clearing their shadows. But really, these conflicts that I've had with my parents, with my roommate, with my friends, they've made me think about how many times in the past I've kind of uh, repressed the trigger. Like something will trigger me, and someone will do something that irritates me or pisses me off or triggers me, and I won't say anything about it, or I'll just bury it. And there's been something that happened in the last 6 months where I was kind of voicing more of the triggers, and that actually led me into more conflict. Of course, not all of that conflict was inherently bad. Some of that conflict was probably a long time coming or something that I needed to face. But I mention that because that can kind of be the gift of Venus and Aries energy, especially, Venus and Aries being ruled by Mars, Mars clearing the shadow on May 2nd. We might be able to face conflicts in a different way, or maybe even be with the uncomfortability of conflict. And sure, certain people find conflict more uncomfortable than others. But yeah, I think there's something like that happening at the beginning of May.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you like giving some personal examples because that speaks to how like standing up for yourself, fighting for yourself can get you to a point where ultimately you do feel more comfortable, you do feel more safe after you've had some of these conflicts, after like shaking up the relationship and being like, actually, I have needs. And Aries energy is going to like fight for their needs. And I think um bringing in the Mars piece too, with Mars and Venus having that whole sign trine to each other, and especially during the period where Venus is applying to that Mars as its ruler. Mars rules Aries, Venus is connecting with Mars, and so there's a nice reception there. And so, like, this conflict that happens, it's not like conflict for conflict's sake. When I think of Leo, Mars and Leo specifically, another one of my natal charts or natal placements that I get to see in the transits this month, it's all about like, getting what you need so that you're in a position to like provide for others as well. Because Leo is like a very generous sign, and when Leo has what it needs, it's inviting you to come join in on the fun too. And so, especially for folks who tend to be conflict avoidant and like not always center their needs, there's not really much of a cup they can pull from to give to others. And then if you do, despite not having what you need, that's where burnout comes in. That's where like feeling taken advantage of comes in because you're giving, giving, and giving and not getting or receiving anything in return. And then you're just like trying to give from an empty place, which is why it is so important to like center your needs, fight for your needs when you need to, because then you can be in a place to better show up for the people around you.
Yeah, I'm a Mars and Leo too, so we have that in common, and I can't I can't even tell you how much that resonates. Like the natural like just the natural pull to be generous and to want to give. I think you're so right. That is such a Leo quality. Um, and also the resentment that
Yeah.
comes from maybe generosity that hasn't necessarily been earned. Because that can, I think that's even maybe a commonality between
Hmm.
Leo and even Cancer, like giving and wanting to be generous, but then forgetting and then later feeling like, well, what the heck? Now I feel taken
Hmm.
advantage of or whatever. So
Right.
we might be resolving some of that within us. I think the first week of May or those first couple days of May. And in general, I'm just excited to see more fire and maybe a return of motivation after this year being so retrograde heavy so far.
Yeah, I think this invigorating fire energy is just what we need to kind of like kickstart us into some movement again.
Definitely, definitely. And that'll lead us into the full moon in Scorpio, which I'll pull up. That full moon's gonna happen on May 12th, so we'll speed right along here. And interestingly, this full moon being in Scorpio is traditionally ruled by Mars. So we have Mars now um, at full speed ahead, ruling this full moon. So I think some of that return to motivation is coming through during this full moon as well. But this one's a little spicy, you know. There's definitely some challenges on this day, May 12th, specifically with Mercury, who is at Taurus, making a square with Pluto. Um, What's your take on that sort of mix of Mercury and Pluto, Janae?
Yeah, I think Mercury-Pluto can be very powerful. It kind of encompasses that like knowledge is power, information is power type of archetype because there is so much you can do with the right information depending on the way that you yield it. And I think with Mercury squaring Pluto, I think the amount of information that is known or unknown will be like a huge factor in like who gets ahead or like who is in a position to like make informed decisions. Like the informed part of informed consent, and this is something I say with clients all the time, but the informed part of informed consent is what is so important. It's like having that information to make the best decision for yourself. And so if people are manipulating information or coercing information, that puts a whole like things can go sideways very quickly without the right information. So I think that like Mercury Pluto, along with the moon being in Scorpio, which tends to be not as forthcoming anyways, I think this could definitely lead to some sort of like mystery or like information vacuum type thing is what I'm thinking of. And like from a place of not knowing, just like having to figure out what to do, even though not all the information is known.
Totally. You on the theme of like sex therapy, what you just said has me thinking about the concept of like a safe word, like a
Hmm.
word that holds some sort of power that means like, hey, this is about to cross my boundaries or this thing is going to cross my boundaries. Can we stop? And I'm sure you know more about it than I do, but like the reason we have a safe word is because when we're in an intimate setting, it can almost be harder to say literally like, hey, this isn't working for me. It might be easier to just, say that one word and let things kind of dissipate from there. There's something on this full moon that kind of reminds me of that. Like the
Hmm.
power of a word, which is Pluto Mercury, and then the full moon in Scorpio, Scorpio illuminating, something that was maybe beneath the surface, or maybe something that we didn't want to see or that we're needing to look at. Yeah, so I think there's some kind of um, interpersonal dynamic at play with this full moon for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I love you bringing in like the safe word piece because I think that's a perfect example of how powerful words really can be. And like thinking about a broader context of like, in an ideal world, we would all be able to communicate perfectly at all times, regardless of what else is going on, which is just not reality. And so sometimes we do need shortcuts. We need to strategize about how are we using language to make sure we're feeling safe? How are we using language to get the desired outcome that we want? So I think this full moon might also be really good about like strategy. Like if there's an important email you need to write, like being very intentional about how you're wording things, because you might notice that um, the right combination of words might have more influence with this type of energy backing it up, as opposed to like, just writing an email willy-nilly and just like throwing it out into the universe. I think during this time, especially, how words are being used can be, fun to play with. I personally believe words are magic. So this is like the type of energy I love. Like, oh yes, this word here in combination with this word is going to make this certain other thing come to fruition. And that's exactly how I wanted it to be. So yeah, I love Mercury-Pluto energy for that reason, because it is like a way to tap into your own power. And language is something that is usually very easily accessible for folks. So being able to like take this everyday tool that you're using, your words, your language, and wielding them with some power and authority, I think can be really cool.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. One more thing that's kind of coming through intuitively is like with the Mars presence of this full moon. Mars is the planet of severing and cutting. And your email example of like, is it better to send this long, fluffy email, or is it better to get right to the point? I would say on this full moon, it's better to get right to the point. And it's reminding me of my dear college professor, who's like the person I love most in the world. She's who made me into a really good writer. She would always say it's always better to do like use less words. And she would always use this word penultimate, which means second to last. And I would be like, Professor, why not just use second to last? Like, who knows what penultimate means? It's such an odd word. And she'd be like, well, second to last is 3 words, and penultimate is 1 word. And it's always better to use in writing the 1 word instead of the 3 words. And yeah, this full moon, there's something that it's like, it's better to just say, hey, that's irritating me. How can we work past it? Versus oh, this happened and blah blah blah, and then this and blah. It's like, no, just get to the point with this full moon, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Because with Moon being in Scorpio, Mercury square Pluto, Mars also like making that whole sign square to the moon as well. It's like nobody is patient at this
No.
time. Like people don't have time for the fluffy language. They're like, what are you talking about? Like I have things to do. So like people's patience will definitely be tested like with this full moon. And one way to help alleviate that is to like be more direct, is to like get to the point so that people can keep it pushing, keep it moving.
Yes, yes. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment below any stories that come up with this full moon, because I'm definitely curious about, yeah, what could manifest on this very interesting day. Um, and really that is what Janae and I highlighted for the first half of May. And really some of the bigger things that happened this month. happen towards the end. Really, our most important transit, I think, of this month is Saturn moving into Aries. And that will be on the 24th of May. I'll throw it up on the screen here if you're watching on YouTube. It's important to note that Saturn does ingress into Aries on the 24th of May. However, Saturn is only in Aries for just a little while. It's really like throughout the summer. It's actually September 1st when Saturn will retrograde back into Pisces. Saturn will have its last visit in Pisces from September 1st, 2025 until Valentine's Day 2026. And then that day, Saturn will move into Aries once again. And then he stays there for good, or at least for the next 2.5 years. So this transit is kind of like a sneak peek, right? It's like the first 4 months of Saturn and Aries. And I'm interested. I'm very interested in this ingress, especially seeing that Saturn really runs right into Neptune and Aries. Um, Janay, I'm interested to hear your general sense of Saturn and Aries and what you think about this transit as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, so Saturn has been in Pisces for a while now and isn't really the most comfortable in Pisces, but is even less comfortable in Aries. Because we've been talking a lot about Aries energy today, and like part of Aries energy is this like fast-paced, like quickly shifting type of energy, which is not really what Saturn likes to do. Saturn likes to be slow, steady, stable, a nice strong foundation that you can build on. And Aries territory is like way too shaky to feel comfortable building that strong foundation on. And so with Saturn moving into Aries, and this is true for like all of the Aries ingresses for a while now, it immediately runs into Neptune. And like Neptune is more of like that watery, diffuse energy, which really you can't really build on top of water, or like swampy land is what I think of with Saturn in particular. In swamps, some people have fun in swamps. I am not one of those people. So Saturn and Aries will feel a little sticky, will feel a little mushy. And that is just like very uncomfortable when you're looking for something to be solid and stable and you get this mush that like gives a little bit more. Not only that, it's hot mush at that because it's Aries. And so it is like just really challenging to feel like solid with this kind of energy.
Yeah. I love a good like nature image for a planet ingressing, and I think the swamplands is such a good metaphor for Saturn and Aries moving into that conjunction with Pluto. In general,
Neptune.
Neptune and Aries moving into that conjunction. And I'm thinking about I'm Saturn and Pisces natally. What Saturn generation are you, Janay?
Yeah, I also have Saturn in Pisces, so I will be celebrating
Yeah.
Saturn moving into Aries. At the same time, I think just generally I'm not gonna like it.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like how I've interacted with some Saturn and Aries individuals because they are the Saturn generation that's one generation younger than me. So if you were born like 1996, around then you might have Saturn and Aries. And I'm thinking about these people. What I tend to get from them is that they have a wound with authority that ends up really working for them. Because we almost need more people to, at this time of like our current regime and a time of revolution, it's like we need people to act on that authoritative wound and rebel. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking about that soul group of Saturn and Aries people now, um, are about to go through a Saturn return period. Saturn and Aries people are just like, fuck off. I don't want to do that.
Hmm.
Like they just won't
Yeah.
do, they won't do what they don't want to do. And they don't want to be told what to do, especially by someone they do not respect. And that's something I think, Saturn really wants respect. Saturn really wants to like do things and build things in integrity, like having personal integrity with whatever they're building. So I'm thinking about how Saturn and Aries, how it activates both the individual but also the collective. I think more of us might lose even more motivation for like doing things for others that we don't have respect for. Does that make any sense to you, Janae?
Yeah, it does. And as I was listening to you speak, I realized I think Saturn and Aries is like the first full Saturn generation of Gen Zs. So with the Pisces, Saturn and Pisces, naturally Pisces has a little bit of both, but like the youngest millennials are Saturn and Pisces, and the oldest of Gen Z are Saturn and Pisces. But Saturn and Aries is just fully Gen Z folks. And thinking about the economy, the country that like these Gen folks like are experiencing their adulthood in, and now they're Saturn return in, it's like, of course they would not trust authority. Of course they would not trust like government and these established systems that have worked, quote unquote, worked for so long, and like just watching them fail over and over again on like a national level. It's like, yeah, there is like a survival mode that kicks in. Like, all right, well, the system isn't going to have my back, so I got to do what I need to do to protect me and mine. And that's like a lot of, the type of rhetoric I hear coming from like the oldest Gen Zs. Like, this isn't what we signed up for. Like, we watched the millennials fail, and we're not going to fail in the same way the millennials did because we saw and we know better. And so we're going to do our own thing. And like, you can't like force us to participate in the system that we know is not going to work for us.
Oh, yeah, completely. Like if anybody's gonna like take down the system, they're gonna have Saturn and Aries in their chart. And it's like we say Saturn is in fall in Aries. So, like you said, Saturn isn't comfortable in Aries. It makes sense that that generation has the planet of structure in an uncomfortable place because that generation has never seen any sort of healthy structure. I mean, have any of us? Probably not, but like
Hmm.
especially that
Yeah.
that through that lens, there's
Hmm.
real structural resentments. And yeah, I'm interested to see what this generation does during their Saturn return. I'm pretty sure Luigi Mangione has Saturn and Aries. Don't quote me on that, but
Hmm.
I think he might be part of the Saturn and Aries generation. I think he's an interesting example of that Gen Z um, kind of vibe. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I'm interested to see how this goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and zooming out a little, and we don't need to spend too much time on this because it is like very big conceptually, but like folks, like early Saturn and Aries folks actually have their natal Saturns trine their natal Plutos in Sag as well. And it's like that Saturn Pluto is powerful. And so like if a Saturn Pluto person does not want to do something, they are not going to do that thing. So I am like all in favor of like having the Saturn and Aries folks just like, mature into like more of their adulthood and be like, nah, we're not doing that. We're gonna like break the system a little bit more. Because it needs to be broken because what's here is not working.
Totally. Yes. Yes. So we'll see. It's almost like that meme where like someone's like sitting in a burning room. That's kind of like what's giving me, Saturn and Aries this month. And I don't necessarily think I'm saying that to have our audience panic. But I think Saturn and Aries is a key player in the plot of how the world is breaking down and transforming. And we get to see a sneak peek of that this summer, or at the beginning of the summer, May 24th, when Saturn moves into Aries. So we'll keep us posted on that, you guys. If anybody has Saturn and Aries, comment below. And happy Saturn return. And I think that's a good segue for our next transit, which is the new moon in Gemini. And this should be a good one for you, Janay, since you personally have moon in Gemini. I was looking, and this new moon will happen on May 26th. And I was looking because I noticed that this new moon, let's see here. Maybe it's really late at night, May 26th. Notice this new moon is kind of in this Gemini pileup. Mercury's in Gemini, Jupiter's in Gemini. One thing I wanted to point out is that we did have a new moon in Gemini last year in 2024 that was co-present with Jupiter in Gemini. And now we have this one on May 26th, May 27th, that's co-present with Jupiter in Gemini. This will be the last new moon in Gemini that's hanging out with Jupiter for like the next 12 years or so. So I just wanted to point that out, that we won't have another new moon in Gemini quite like this one, especially with that Jupiterian presence there. I'll give the mic to you, Janay. What are you thinking with this new moon?
Yeah, actually, I'm not having a lot of thoughts, just a lot of like lightness in my being thinking about this, all this Gemini energy. It's like a breath of fresh air after like the heaviness of the full moon and then the retrogrades going back and forth up until this point. And it's like we can finally breathe again. And it's a nice fresh start in Gemini, which is like so airy and like so when I think of air, I think about like having so much more space. And so things feeling so confined for so long, this might actually be a moment for us to like stretch out, take a deep breath, and actually like like find a little moment of peace for a sec.
Yes, yes. I think like it's hard to be curious sometimes, or have um the energy to be curious, because sometimes we're like stressed out, we're burnt out. All we really have the energy for is the same old, like, you know, I don't know, like watching our same TV show or doing our same thing every single day. And I think there's something about this new moon in Gemini that kind of makes us curious again. Maybe we finally decide to try that new thing, or we haven't been dating in a long time, and this is the transit where we decide to go on a date for the first time in a long time. There's like some level of, okay, I actually do have the energy for newness, perhaps.
Hmm. Yeah, the phrase that came to mind for me is like a factory reset, like on your laptop or something, just like clean slate. Let's like do something new. And I think like especially being in Gemini with Mercury, like being about technology, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a time to just like try something new, start building something new, invite in some like new different processes. And there was something that came to mind as you were speaking, but I think my brain just let go of it. But if it comes back, I'll be sure to mention it again. Um, but yeah, with the all this Gemini energy, there is like like a lot more expanded, Jupiter being there as well, expanded mental capacity to actually like take that risk and change things up.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is like, it's good because we really end the month on a Gemini note. We have that new moon, and then the next day, or a couple days after, on May 30th, we have the Cazimi at 8 degrees Gemini. Sorry, 9 degrees Gemini. And that's when Mercury will conjunct the sun. So that Cazimi moment sort of mixed in with this energy of the new moon in Gemini. I would say if you're familiar with your chart, really zoom in on that, specifically that Gemini house, and maybe how that house in the chart is needing a rebirth or a little bit of rearranging or a little bit of inspiration, because I think that could be really good to focus on that part. Kazemi points from the Hellenistic perspective. Janay, do you have any good insight on how the traditional astrologers might have viewed that moment?
Yeah, so I think the translation, quote unquote, because Kazimi isn't a real word in Arabic, but how we understand it is that a planet is in the heart of the sun. And so just thinking about the phrasing of that, like, ooh, the heart of the sun feels so warm, feels so like empowered and uplifted. And that's like the same type of energy you get when a planet is Kazimi, or like conjunct the sun by a degree. And so Mercury is already in Gemini. It's in its own domicile, giving it like a lot of strength, a lot of ability to like do what it wants to do. When I think of Mercury, I think Mercury is about like trade, so like trading information, trading conversations, like this back and forth that can happen. And so there is so much ability for Mercury to like pass things along, pass things back and forth. And in the heart of the sun, it's like even more boosted. So this is like a very strong Mercury that can do all the Mercury things that it wants to do. And the sun is like the backers, you know, it's like the venture capital that's like giving you the ability to like have all these like great grand ideas and like being able to figure out how to actually implement them with the Kazemi specifically. But then I also did want to circle back to the new moon because something interesting about the lunations this month is how Mercury is like doing its own things with Pluto during both the lunations. And so during the full moon, we had that Mercury square Pluto, and this moon we have a domicile Mercury trining Pluto. So that energy is a little less stressful, but still is powerful. And so we have a very like strong um a word that comes to mind is like enlightened Mercury, like ruling the new moon and also making that trine to Pluto. It's like, oh yeah, you at this point you learned the information that you needed and you do feel like so much more empowered than you did during the full moon.
Exactly. We were having some telepathy there because I was thinking like we started the beginning of the month like there were some maybe communication challenges, power struggles, and now we're kind of ending with yeah, like a more enlightened way of speaking, or a kind of new viewpoint on how to communicate with someone or trade ideas with a friend or whatever it may be. I think are I often associate Mercury with the throat chakra. Feels like this month our throat chakra is like opening up and it's getting easier to speak our minds or say things that we need to say. So I think that could be part of the last bit of this month being so Gemini heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that our telepathy came out talking about the Gemini buildup because communication does is so much more seamless. There is like much more of an ease of like the ideas that you're sharing, the like the conversations that you're having with like all of this Gemini energy. It's just feels so much more natural to have that back and forth. And like with the Mercury Cazimi, especially, it's like, oh yeah, like there's a like a synergy that's happening there.
Yes. And speaking of the twins and like telepathic communication,
Exactly.
yeah, now you're having me think about how the Gemini twins, Castor and Pollux, in the mythology, I don't remember which one is which, but one of them is mortal and the other is a god. But they both were raised together as like brothers, and I'm thinking about how that is a really good metaphor for Gemini energy, like the one twin that can have that interpersonal, like mortal connection, and then the other twin that is talking more to the gods and spirit, and thinking like our conversations at the end of the month, they aren't just good with like our partners or our friends. They're also like there's also a direct line with the universe that's coming through, especially with Jupiter there. And we could even say this new moon, and then with the Mercury Cazimi, even Jupiter co-present with that Cazimi. It's kind of like some final hurrah energy for Jupiter in Gemini. So maybe there's some extra communication with the universe around this time too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like an inspirational type of time, and even thinking about the word inspiration and how like spire has to do with breath, and like this happening in an air sign, so like very inspired ideas that could be coming through, and then also just inspiring interactions with the people around you.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing the month ahead forecast with me, Janae. And of course I'll have all of your info in the show notes, but do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about like your current offerings? I don't know if you are booking astrological readings at this time, or even is your therapy practice in Chicago completely full? Yeah, give us the overview of how to work with you.
Yeah, for sure. So my bookings are currently open. Like I said, I mostly work just one-on-one with folks with astrology, but if you do have a partner, you want to look at your charts together, I offer that as well. With my therapy practice, I am available to work with any resident in Illinois virtually, and then if you are in Chicago, I do also have openings for individual, couples, polycules, families. I love working with groups and doing therapy with more than one person in the room is my jam. And yeah, like I said, I'm primarily a relationship and sex therapist, and would love to work with you if you're in need. But I also want to shout out AYA, the Association for Young Astrologers. We are a nonprofit group who's focused on uplifting educational resources and connecting astrological practices through the generations. So if you are a young person into astrology, if you are a young professional to the field, and or if you support folks who are in either of those areas, then the Association for Young Astrologers would love to have you. So you can check out Aya's website. Also, you can go to my own website, janayanthony.com, if you want to book or read about the other things I'm up to.
Yes. Thanks for shouting out Aya because I think it's something that that young astrologers, especially students who haven't been in the astrology realm for a while, people don't know that there are these awesome astrology organizations that you can attend. You can become a member and then you get access to that organization's talks, classes. Sometimes there's perks if you attend a conference, things like that. Yeah, so I can't recommend Aya enough if you are specifically a young astrologer looking for community. I know Aya was probably my first like online astrology forum I ever attended. It might have been even pre-COVID times. I think you guys were doing online stuff even before
Mhm.
Zoom was cool. So I remember getting on an Aya talk and being like, holy crap, like all these people are so cool and I'm just a little astrologer. So I think it's a good opportunity to hear your peers speak and just find community.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would love to welcome you and everyone who is like looking for a little bit of an astro home. Aya has been one of the most, even before I was like on the board. So speaking from personal experience as well, but just one of the most inviting places, inviting astrology, um, communities that I've been a part of. So, would love to have anyone who is looking for it to join us.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And we'll have all of those links in the show notes again. And give us a give us a subscribe, share on Instagram if you enjoyed this episode. And we will see ya in the next big three. And thanks for listening, guys.